in my view, media played a very important role, not only in this crisis as we see it now, but they were very important also before that crisis. So they built their influence on two levels. Basically, they framed the context of the immigration debate in Europe. For the last 20 years, the researchers in Europe were analyzing the ways media portrays immigrants and foreigners in Europe. And what was very important as a feature of this framing was this discourse of security and blaming, especially the media in the countries that actually have immigrants in the EU. We have to remember that out of 28 EU member states, the issue of immigration concerns probably slightly more than half, right? So in these countries, media treated minorities and immigrants as an interesting topic, for building the news. So they would actually blow out of proportion issues like crime among immigrants or issues of cultural diversity like honor crimes. And this image built this idea that there are groups of foreigners in Europe that can be integrated and not. And I think that not many people realized what this message was doing on the larger EU scale. Why? We discovered that actually this autumn, when you would have Eastern European countries that do not have immigrants, where the populations would actually revive or remember or recall those images from Western European media, and they would use it as the argument against the asylum seekers. And this is very important. This shows you that these populations do not really have a possibility to compare the media image with the reality, because they don't have immigration reality. They only have this image created by watching the news from France, Sweden, and the Netherlands, for example, right? So that was a very important framing exercise that suddenly became important in the EU. And then, in this context, we had two moments where the media discourse in Western Europe actually changed. So, in a way, that the Western media was approving of their right to seek refuge in Europe. And suddenly the reports were more positive about these people. And that was a clash with whatever populations in Europe would expect from the media, right? There was a sense of cognitive dissonance between the framing that was really accepted and then what was going on. So I would have talks with a lot of people in Eastern Europe who just would not understand what happened. And then another turn actually happened last Friday, when a report of a Syrian passport, false most probably, that was found in Paris with one of the attackers, changed the discourse into terrorism. So again, the discourse is now more about security. So again, people are a little bit lost in the reporting, and I think that the dynamic is very interesting to see, but also it's very dangerous for the future of the crisis, because the media seem not to be able to report on this population in a very objective and not emotional way. So I think that we are in for many more flips, let's say, in this discourse in the future. Now, what I also wanted to underline is the language that is being used. So at the beginning we were talking about the migrants, then about refugees. Now we are talking more and more about asylum seekers, and for many reasons this is actually the best way to talk about the flows, because this is the legal terminology that we are, when we use it, at least we are not creating another reality. However, we all remember that there was this conflict between refugee or economic migrant at the beginning of the crisis, and this is still very important for Eastern European member states, for example, where the idea of a refugee is not very clear. Even if in the media, for example in Poland, you would only see the word refugee used, not asylum seeker, refugee, this actually is underpinned with this idea that these people are economic migrants and asylum seekers, and everybody is put in this one category that is quite in opposition to what we see in Western Europe. And this also reflects the split between the two parts of Europe on the question of accommodation of these populations. Because I think that this is the first time when, for example, me personally, I started using Facebook more than before, as the reaction to the discourse of my friends on Facebook, especially from Poland, that actually revealed a total ignorance about migration issues in general. And for me, it was really interesting how people would read through the media the discourses from the past, and they would apply this negative framing in the discourse that was and is still prevailing in Eastern European countries. Whereas people from the Western countries would basically go with the flow, with the mediatic flow, and that was a majority, I would say. But what I'm saying is just anecdotal evidence, and I think that there is a good research to be done on that, actually.